So I haven't done a video in about a year, but I thought now would be a good time to do one because I'm doing this thing where I'm drawing all 452 Animal Crossing villagers because I need to do something to kill the time before the Switch game comes out. I just need to do something. So I'm going to show you how I drew all of them in 3 different phases. First, I took all my reference images and I separated them onto different layers. Each layer has a sketch of a villager and their reference image with their personality type. And I have a color palette for each of the villager personality types. So you have jock, lazy, whatever. Turns out that the first smug villager alphabetically is Beardo. So until Beardo appeared, I didn't really have a smug palette. I go in and add it later for the C, D, E villagers and so on. But for this file, I didn't have the smug palette, so that's why that's missing. Now, I do try to stick to these limited color palettes, but I do bend them a little, so if there's a character that's entirely blue and their personality color palette doesn't have a blue, I'll take the purple and I'll make it a little more bluish, or I'll make their shadows bluer. So it's not a strict limited palette, but I like the idea of doing a limited palette. That way if I do prints of similar characters like snooty villagers, they'll all kind of match. So I'm not too worried about getting these sketches perfect because I have so many of these to do. I just kind of settle on a cute pose and I'm like, that looks good enough, and I move on to the next. This way I can bang out about, I think there's 47 bee name villagers. I did this entire document in maybe 3 hours, and that's including a snack break and putting the iPad down and doing something else. Maybe 3 hours. Not bad for 47 sketches. And this is probably the most time-consuming phase of the whole thing, so we're moving pretty quick here. Now, there's some characters that have different names, like Blazel. I gave her Blazel, but I think she was also Sally or Hazel or something. There's a couple of villagers that have reused names or retranslated names, so I hope I don't draw the same villager twice, but if I do, oops. So, I go in and sketch all of them, and you'll see very quickly at the end, because this is sped up and it's a Procreate recording, you'll see I just kind of slap all the colors underneath the line art very quickly. It doesn't matter if it's messy or not, since I'm just going to use it for reference for the next phase. But I'm not fussing over little details. I just want everything to look really cute and simple and clean, and I want it to read like the characters in a way that's a mix of my own personal style as well as keeping all the distinct features that make each villager unique. Part of my reasoning for doing this entire thing is because every single villager is someone's favorite, and all the comments I got on that video I uploaded forever ago of the Animal Crossing speed paint was like, draw so-and-so, you should draw Pearl next, you should draw so-and-so next, whatever. Well, I already drew Pearl, but you should draw my favorite villager next. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to draw all of them, and then I don't ever have to hear this request again. But then after that, it's going to be draw Rossetti, draw, but I'll get to them next. But for now, let's do all these villagers. And so we're going to move on to the next phase, which is transferring these sketches over to Adobe Animate for the flat color fills. So I take my images that I've sent over through AirDrop from my iPad to my MacBook Pro, I drag them into Adobe Animate, which I use for everything because it's just what I'm used to. And what I do is I take the vector pencil tool and I outline the artwork and I make solid color fills. What I do is I take the vector pencil tool and I make solid color fills. I make shapes, I fill them in with the colors from the template or the palette underneath, and then I delete all the vector lines, which leaves behind just pretty basic, clean vector shapes. That way I get a really nice hard shape that for me is really hard to achieve in Procreate with a freehand drawing tool. You could do something like this in Procreate, but for me it's much faster and easier to do this part of the drawing in Adobe Animate. Totally unnecessary and just a weird thing I like to do, but this is how I do all of these villagers. So I'm going in, I'm ignoring all the details such as the little wrappings on her mummy outfit, her pupils, her eyebrows, her mouth, and the little lines on her paws that separate her toes. All that I'm going to add in the Procreate phase, so I'm just doing almost like a minimalist silhouette style color block of just the colors. See here I'm going in and filling all the colors from the palette underneath. Ignoring the pupils, ignoring the eyebrows, all that stuff. I take it, delete the vector lines, export it as a transparent PNG, and bring it over to my Procreate and iPad. So I open it up using Dropbox. I send the transparent PNG over to Dropbox, open it up in Procreate into a template I've already created. Now this template already has the background in it and my signature, and on top of everything there's a texture layer that's made with the Bonobo chalk brush. It's set to 52% opacity and set to overlay, and it just adds a little bit of grain, but I hide it for now because I need to polish up the areas that I missed in the animate part of drawing this, like that little triangle that wasn't filled in, and there's a little area by her eye and part of the little cobra on her head I didn't really do correctly, so I'm just going to go in and tweak those things up. Once I have her fixed, I'll go into the document that I used to sketch her. I grab that really messy first sketch, I bring it in and I paste it on top of the flat color layer, and I lower the opacity of that. I'm going to use it as my guide for the cleaner pencil lines that I'm going to draw on top. So you see here I'm kind of tracing her eyeliner, pupils, eyebrows, just the essential lines. I'm not going to outline the entire character. I want a really simple look, so I use as few lines as possible. And in the case of this character, I do use lines to separate the arms from the hands because she has the crossed arm pose, and it's kind of hard to tell even with the shadow layer that I add later. It's kind of hard to tell the distinction between her hands and her arms, so I do add a pencil line to help make that clearer because I do want these characters to be really easy to read, as it were. So for the lines in some areas, like the little mummy wrapping, I'll overshoot the lines just to make a nice, cleaner, smoother line, confident line, and then I'll erase the end. I'm trying to get better at that because I have a really bad habit of itchy sketching where I just kind of go over the same line over and over. I'm trying to get in the habit of using my whole arm and doing really confident lines, so I'd rather overshoot and have to erase a bunch of stuff than do a really jittery line that doesn't really look as good. So I've been using that technique with these, which has been great. I go in and I add the highlights on her eyes, and I clean up the little outlines and delete that rough sketch layer, so that's gone now. The next part is I take that flat color layer, I duplicate it, and I lower the saturation, and I make the color balance a little bit more purple or blue or whatever shadow color I think works best. And for me, my brain, I like to paint with light as opposed to add shadow to my flats. It just makes more sense to me. So in the shadow layer, I'm painting with light by setting the eraser to the Bonobo chalk brush at various sizes, and I go in and I paint where I think the light would hit. This would be a lot easier with a clipping mask in all honesty, and I probably should use a clipping mask on the more complex characters later. But for now, I want to keep things simple, and in my mind, I want to commit to the lines and shapes I'm making with the eraser. With the clipping mask, you almost get too much freedom because you can go in and make everything perfect, but I don't want to be precious with these because there is a lot of them and I don't want to get burned out. But I think this looks good enough. I think it sells the 3D effect. I think it adds enough lighting, and nobody I've shared it with has had a problem with the little inconsistencies in lighting and little areas that aren't perfect. So, you know, post it and move on. I think it looks really good. So... that's something I'm learning too, is you gotta post stuff even if you don't think it's perfect, because I deleted a lot of stuff that I could have posted that I'm sure people would have liked, and instead I just kind of threw it out. So I gotta get better about that, so this is kind of an exercise in that. Like, no, it's not perfect. I could refine all these for another hour or two, but I think they look cute, I think they look good, and they all match, and it's a cohesive look. So I'm just going in and I'm painting in with light, making sure all the areas have that 3D lit look. And also, I really like this technique of using the Bonobo chalk texture brush for the eraser, because aside from this and the really faint layer of texture on top, there's no other texture in this image, but it comes across like I painted it all with textured brushes. I'm way too lazy for that, especially for this many characters. So to me, this kind of shortcut is really awesome, using an eraser to add texture and then just having one texture overlay. Normally for some kind of weird grainy texture, I would add a couple different textures and noise layers and whatever to get this look. This is way better, and it's fewer layers, which if you use Procreate at all, you know that your layers are limited, especially in a higher res document like this, so as few layers as you can possibly use, the better. I was really inspired by like kids book illustrators and people like that I follow on Instagram and Twitter. How they use a lot of texture in their work, and also the covers of the Harry Potter books, that really soft pastel look. So now all I have to do is change the color of the background, and this is done. I just make it a nice rusty orange color that I think fits with her look, and she's finished. So all I have to do now is do this like 430 more times. Awesome. So thank you for watching this. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want to see me post these in real time over the next, I don't know, year or so. And hopefully by the time I'm done, we'll have a new Animal Crossing game, but at this rate, maybe not. Follow me if you want to see more of my art, and I do hope to be posting more stuff on YouTube. I gotta get better about it. I get weirdly nervous about anybody caring, even though I only have like 60 subscribers, and realistically nobody's gonna berate me for an art video. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Peace.